Hey guys, it's Neptorka here, and we're going to be doing something a little different today. Now that basically the entire Rinascita storyline is over, I would like to go through and rank every single chapter that we have experienced throughout Wuthering Waves 2.0. As of the release of this video, basically 2.8 should be released by now, and many of y'all should be playing Chisa. But I believe that is going to be a prelude to the next chapter coming. So we're going to be focusing on the main story of Rinascita. Now, we will be starting at 2.0 and going all the way through 2.7. That will be 8 stories total. 7, I guess, really, if you really think about it. But I will do all 8. We'll rank them from the beginning. We will rank them from 8 all the way to 1. I will explain why my reasoning for each one, go from there. I'm going to be ruffling a lot of feathers in this one because I do not just, follow the popular opinion out there, even if that popular opinion is wrong. And yes, it is wrong. You'll hear me say that many times in this video, but it's been an interesting ride in Rinascita. I've loved every part of it. So let's go ahead and get into it. All right, first up, in the Rinascita storyline, rank 8 is going to be patch 2.3. Now you might notice that there is a black screen in front of you right now. Yeah, that's right. That's because there was nothing in patch 2.3. It was absolute garbage. It was the anniversary patch, and it was the worst anniversary in a gacha game I have ever experienced. Which, considering how low the bar was set by a certain other popular gacha game, this was pretty bad. But it is what it is. I have said this on, multiple forums or whatnot, comment section, and some people were like, well, didn't you experience Chacona's story? Like, don't even try to defend the fact that there was nothing but dog shit in all of 2.3. I did enjoy Chacona's storyline, but that wasn't a main storyline. It was frustrating that we didn't get something good for the anniversary. It was a slop fest, frustrating to deal with. Let's not waste any more time on it. That was 2.3. It sucked, and that is why it is at number 8. Coming in at number 7 was actually a pleasant surprise for me, and actually this one was really close to being 6 instead of the one that's there. And that one is going to ruffle quite a few feathers. But in 7th place, it's going to be patch 2.1. Now, honestly, for this patch, I wasn't really expecting much. I do like Phoebe, who came out during this patch. But I honestly wasn't expecting much because usually right after a massive patch, like patch 2.0 was, you don't really expect to get much, and that's what I was kind of expecting. And even though I do not like fishing events in the game, the characters, even though I love Phoebe, don't really care much for Brant, the characters didn't really mean much to me. I was still very pleasantly surprised at 2.1, the kind of side main story quests. I call them side main story because they still had a little bit of bearing on the main story, but they weren't like character stories. It was fun with Phoebe and Brant up in the Isles doing their thing, and then also we had that other portion dealing with Zani and Carlotta down in the vault. And I was expecting a much more linear experience, which we got in another version coming up, but it wasn't. Like, we got like a full zone. I wasn't expecting it, and so I was very surprised. And so maybe my expectations were too low, not because I don't trust Kuro to do something really cool, but because it was the after patch of after a big major patch, and usually they're really small, and this one, it just didn't feel like it. It felt like it was so full of life the entire patch. Very impressed by it. There's a lot of really good patches out there, and I like, even though I enjoyed this one, it is still, kind of a sub-story patch, which is only a step up from not having a story patch at all, like it was in number 8. The rest after this are pretty much all story patches, and so that's why it doesn't go further than just being in 7th place. 6th place is going to piss a lot of people off, and I'm just here to tell you that you're wrong, and you need to relook at things in life, probably. That is right. Patch 2.5 is in 6th place for me. Now, I honestly wanted to put it in 7th place. It was a terrible patch. The only redeeming thing of this entire patch is, ironically, it was probably one of the most well presented stories of the entire of the entire Rinascita arc. It was fantastic. Like its presentation value was unbelievable. But there were so many things that bothered the hell out of me with it. It frustrated me, and it frustrated me even more to see people coping so hard online, trying to say that it's the greatest story ever. And I have my, opinions as to why they were coping so hard, but we're not going to get into other games and, competitiveness in this one. We're going to focus just on Wuthering Waves. First big problem with the patch is that it was, it was a character story patch. It didn't feel like a main story because it was just for Lova the entire time. For Lova and Rover. That's it, the entire time. And you'll hear me repeat this many times down the line. It frustrates me. I don't know why they have all these characters and then we never even talk to them or see them or interact with them ever again. That was the first thing that really bothered me about it, and I will be mentioning this down the line. It's actually a greater problem with pretty much all of Rinascita as a whole. There are really only 2 patches that escaped this dynamic, with the exception of the patch that we just mentioned in 2.1, but as I said before, that was a sub-patch. Now, you are expected to feel sorry and pity for this terrorist in patch 2.5, and I'm sorry, I've seen what she's done. I don't feel sorry at all for her. And yes, I was one of those people during the storyline. I was telling Rover too to chill. Come on, Rover, take it easy. Stop battering Frolova. But it was more from a sense of come on, she's had it hard. Quit giving her a hard time. No. It's got nothing to do with that. It's got to do with the fact that you're stuck in the fabricatorium I can't even pronounce it. Fabricatorium of the deep. You're stuck there, man. Just chill out for now. Take this weird alliance that you have to deal with for now to get what you need done. And then you could go back to really hating her all the time. But for now, just kind of chill a little bit. And that's basically my feeling on it. But some people were like, oh, poor Frolova. And there's morons in the internet. Gosh, who is it? Gotcha Smack. He's like, man, you guys, you've never experienced what Frolova had to go through. And, I can't believe he's saying this. While there are people in Texas, probably 2 hours from where he lives, who had to go through the exact same thing Frolova went through. No, a meteorite did not slam into Texas, but there are people in the middle of Texas with some flash floods during that time period that lost their entire families. Everyone was killed except for maybe a daughter or something. There was a family right near me who lost almost everyone except for one. That's awful. It's terrible. It happens all the time in society, okay? No, it's not video game only, Gotcha Smack. Get your head out of your ass. And so, man, these people who defended this chapter were coping so hard. It was frustrating to watch. Why should I care in a chapter about the terrorist and her hardships? I guarantee you those people from Texas, they're not running off to join ISIS now, okay? So there was no excuse for anything Frolova did. She's out of her mind. And one of the biggest defenses that many people have were well, she paid for it. She died. Yeah, 2.7, check. She didn't die. She's not stuck in that Sonaro sphere like you guys said. She's a-okay. This was a terrible patch. On top of that, I talked about how great it was for 2.1 and you could like move around and there was a lot of exploration available. That wasn't the case in the Fabricatorium of the Deep. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, man. Fabricatorium of the Deep, man. It was so stupid. It was a linear path. It looked like you had a massive area to explore. And then they're like, no, no, no. We're just going to take out these 5 circles in this massive area we put out here. You're only going to be able to explore these areas. And by the way, it's going to be like Final Fantasy 13 type linear. You're not going to be able to go anywhere exploring. It was a shit patch. It really was. And it pissed me off. It just frustrated me, man. And, there's nothing much else to say to that. I could go on probably for hours about this, but let's just move on. So in rank 5, we have patch 2.4. Now, 2.4 came after basically, I would say, the height of certain other games. People were really upset with the yapping that would go on or too much dialogue in other games, I guess you could say. And I can agree. Some people can't take all that. Some people do like it, but 2.4 cut back a little too much. And there were just 2 big problems with it. The first is they split it into 2 parts, and that made the first part awkward, and the second part didn't mesh well because it didn't have the first part. Like you did them in 2 parts, and it really kind of messed things up. You should really not split anything into 2 parts unless you have a really good stopping point or a meaning for it. A good example of this was 2.6. Okay, 2.6 is a good example of how to do it correctly. 2.4 is how you do not do it. It just ended awkward. It was weird. It was like, all right, till next time. After you win the tournament, and it was weird. Problem number 2, it was the Lupa show. Nobody but Lupa, just you and Lupa. And that's the problem with the previous patch. And I'll mention this. This is in several patches. It was just you and Lupa for the entire time. That's frustrating. Like, these are not character stories. They're supposed to be main story quests, okay? So make them main story quests. Don't give Augusta and Yuno just little cameos at the very end of the first half. Have them more incorporated throughout the entire story. Put in some of these new characters. Have Buling appear more. I understand that we switched zones somewhat. We've gone from Rinascita to Septimum. Okay, we've made that switch. You need to have all the characters working together and make it a main story quest, as opposed to it just being your simple. It's us and Lupa. That's all it is. Now, the third problem I had with this one is how quick it went. I mentioned how this is right around the time that people were really frustrated with other games and how much dialogue was in them. Well, I feel like they went a little bit too far the other direction. It felt so rushed playing that storyline. I sat there, playing through it, and I was like, man, it's just like next, 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 next. There was not a good flow to the story. And to me, that was disappointing. It was just weird. Like you encounter Lupa, and Lupa's like, "Yeah, join me in this, this tournament." And Lupa like turns the corners, like, "Oh hey, look, the arena just happens to be right here." Like it felt so linear and quick. The storyline that went through things. We got this brand new massive zone of Septimont. And the frustrating thing is, it reminds me of World of Warcraft. There was a zone in World of Warcraft called Ardenweald, and it was a freaking gorgeous zone. But the story of the zone took you down one road on the right-hand side. It was very quick, to the point, and like 70% of the zone wasn't even touched in the entire story. And this is kind of the problem that came with 2.4 story. Come on, show us everything. Send us around. Send us to different villages or whatnot. Let us explore. A good example is 2.0, which we'll talk about, soon. 2.0, we went to different regions within Rinascita. or Raguna. I always mix up Raguna and Rinascita. We went, to different regions, whether it be with Brant and Rosha, or we went to villages and so forth. We went to different areas that explored the entire new zone that we got. They didn't do that in this one. They quickly sent you from one place to the next. They made it as quick as possible. When we went down into the sunken area, I was like, man, this would be so cool if we, got a little bit more backstory of what's going on down here, and have a little bit more interaction with like the sunken area of the city. And I believe, if I remember correctly, we actually did later on. We in the second part, we actually did, which kind of leads to the problem also of having that second part, 3 weeks in advance or 3 weeks later. It just kind of felt weird, and I wish they had done more of incorporating different characters, and to also, sometimes there has to be a little bit of yapping in order to build the story. I'm not saying I want, an 8-hour story or whatever. I have other games that can provide that for me if I wanted. You could have increased the amount of dialogue around there, and, kind of bring to life Lupa a little bit more. But, obviously, you probably should have had other characters in there so that you could talk more with them, learn more about, kind of the prelude to and Augusta. But they never gave that to us, or Buling as well. And unfortunately, they never did that, and that's why this one ranks so low. Alright, so in fourth place, we have patch 2.6. Now, I gotta say, I have a little bit of bias on this one because I really loved and Augusta. So that part I really did enjoy. But this one I liked because they started to bring in more characters. Even if they're characters that we didn't play, like Avidius, it was enjoyable to have a little bit of a larger cast. Now, the biggest black mark on this particular story was the fact that Lupa wasn't there. Like, we had this huge hunt out there, and it's supposed to be the pride of everyone out there, and Lupa's not there. That is the dumbest mistake they made with this patch. But the zone was really cool. They had a great lead up. I enjoyed Augusta's involvement and how it kind of leads up to basically going through Augusta's past and how it leads to the ultimate finale of this chapter. But overall, it was a new zone. It was spread out. We went everywhere in the new zone. We were able to have a complete story going through Augusta's her background. And eventually, even though it was split into two parts, we also got to go through a lot of Yuno's background. Even across both parts. It's not like they focused only on Augusta on the first part and only on Yuno on the second part. Now, because of the nature of the story, the second part was more focused on Yuno, but the first part of the story, they didn't just focus only on Augusta, even though they could have. But I really did enjoy this. Now, I know for a lot of people it wasn't their favorite, and that's fine. There is some personal perspective here. You can decide whether or not you like the spooky dark area where Augusta was following her child form all over the place. The old town that basically got ravaged kind of looked like a volcanic, like the leftover remains of a town drenched in volcanic ash. I can't think of the town, but like Pompeii. I think it was Pompeii in Italy. The history behind that. That's kind of what it felt like to me, and it was really cool. And they could have drawn inspiration from this, considering the inspiration for Septimon as a whole being ancient Greek and Rome. But I enjoyed that, but I can understand, some people don't. Like, this is one of those things where you can have a good debate as to whether or not it was entertaining or not entertaining. I liked having that extra dialogue there to learn more about Augusta and so forth. Now, a lot of people, this chapter came off the heels of 2.5. Now, 2.5 being as dog shit of a story as it was for probably the most overrated story patch I've ever seen in a gacha game. You know, I just as I admitted earlier, it was probably one of the best presented patches ever. And so with this patch 2.6, there was a downgrade in presentation, but the overall story of you know the Septimontians coming together to fight this thing was epic to me. I loved it, and it was enjoyable. And I wish we got more. Like, I want this to be the lower end of what we get. You know, we're always gonna have ups and downs, you know, going through different story patches. This is what I hope the lower end gets to, as far as the lower end it ever gets. Because this is, I still think this was great and it was enjoyable. There were different aspects. Now, as I said, a little bit of bias because I loved Augusta and you know, and also I'm a kind of history buff, so the enjoyment of the ancient Rome connections was also really cool to me. But I can understand if other people may like it and may not. But overall, this is when things started to turn around. The biggest flaw in this one was, of course, Lupa not being there. That is the biggest problem of this entire patch, was Lupa not being there. That's frustrating. You have a brand new character. This was still very close to just character story. And that's irritating, man. Stop it. Like, bring in all these characters. That's what they're there for. Moving on to third place, top 3. You know, going into this video, I was still debating which one deserved the 3rd spot. And finally, I decided to go with patch 2.0. And that's only because 2.7 exists. Before maybe 2.7, I probably would have said 2.0 was better. Here's why. 2.0 included so many new characters in Rinascita. All these different characters, I enjoyed having them all come together, work together, etc. You went to every single, you know, zone out there in Rinascita. You explored the different towns, you know, the underground harbors, etc. And it made a complete story with a cast of characters that was at least, you know, bigger than what you can count on your 2 hands, okay? That can't be said for the other patches, which have been character story patches, and it's been frustrating to kind of watch them. So I'm like, okay, where are all the other characters? Well, they don't exist at the moment in Wuthering Waves. But 2.0 was that entry into kind of revitalizing, you know, Wuthering Waves after, you know, how things went in I believe it was 1.4. And so it felt really good. Exploration was amazing. They set up the storyline for so many great stories. The only thing that's kind of disappointing is one of my favorite things, and I forgot to mention this earlier, and it's another knock against freaking patch 2.5, but, you know, they set up Fenrico in, like, this corrupt church, and, you know, this is something we're going to have to deal with down the line, and they just used it as a plot point to make it plausible for Falova to be a playable character. That pissed me off so much that they ruined Fenrico so that they could create this garbage slop for Falova. Pissed me off, but let's focus on 2.0. I loved how you, as I mentioned, I loved how you went to different areas. You explored all of the regions of Rinascita. It wasn't a predestined path like it was in 2.4. And it flowed well. And that's, for the longest time, we had so many patches that were just like character stories and not main stories with many characters, that this was kind of a patch that was important to me because of it. Because we had multiple characters in it. It would have been even better if they had already started to introduce a little bit of Cantarella in this patch, which they hadn't before. We didn't really know much about the Phassalias at this time. And so,
I didn't know I was waiting
because of that, you know, overall the story was so enjoyable because we had so many people introduced and we were working in different ways. And it was telling a story instead of just like a relationship between Rover and whoever else it was. 2.0 is special to me. Hopefully with 3.0 coming out, we'll get something just as good. And hopefully they know, to use to introduce their characters. You know, they don't have to focus on them. They can make the focus on like Carlotta as an example. But, you know, you had Zani in there, you had Rosha in there, Brant. Well, Rosha was in that patch, but you had Brant, Phoebe. Phoebe became a favorite of mine in this first patch. So I hope they continue down this line. We'll see if they do, but you never know. Next is patch 2.2. Now, this is the first patch in which I came out, and the very first complaint I had with this patch was, well, that was like a character story. It was just like you, Cantarella,
Anything else?
and Cardathea, and that's it. Okay. The entire story. Nothing else. Like, you guys were off in an entirely different zone doing your own thing. Like, man.
Cinematic.
And this was the beginning. Like, ever since this patch, we had like four or five matches in a row that was just straight
that swirl
like character bonding stories instead of main story quests, and that really frustrated me. But overall, the presentation in this is only beaten by patch 2.5. The story coming out of it, the setting, was just all phenomenal. Like, I don't have much to gripe about this patch other than, you know, the fact that, you know, other characters were not a part of it. Avenolium, as much as I don't want to go back there and figure things out and find treasure chests and explore, Avenolium was a fun place to be and an interesting quest to go along with it. You know, you see the background behind the Phasalias and, you know, what they do, and, you know, it kind of helps bring to a close Cardathea, the relationship between the Threnodian and the Sentinel. I loved every part of it, really enjoyed it. Short, sweet, to the point, great patch, but it wasn't as good as patch 2.7. 2.7 was almost everything I've wanted. You know, I've wanted all those characters to coming together like it was in 2.0, and they finally got it in 2.7. And until 2.7 came out, 2.0 I still thought was better than 2.2, merely because of the fact that we were able to get more than just a character story. The only other patches that were more than just a character story were 2.0 and 2.1. And finally, with 2.7, we got it. And we got everyone coming together. They're working together for a common goal. All of the patches, all of the different storylines are being wrapped up. We're learning the ending of everything, how the Threnodian gets away with it. I loved every part of it. There were issues that I had with it. Galbrina comes just seemingly out of nowhere and like has all the answers. And it was cool finding out the trick that Cardathea and Galbrina played on us and everyone else. But it was just kind of odd for a character to just seemingly come out of nowhere, and she just has the answers to everything all along, man. If we had her from 2.0, none of this other stuff would have ever happened. She would have taken care of it. But the cinematics and everything in this one were just, it was just so fun to play through. And that's why we're playing these games, you know. We're playing them to have a lot of fun and to enjoy them. And, you know, after this, I played 2 other gacha game stories, and I'm like emotionally drained at this point. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to start 2.8 right off the bat, but it really did. Like, it was kind of one of those stories where at the end you look back and you're like, man, we've done a lot here in Rinascita, and it was fun. And so overall, I think this was the most complete story. If 2.0 had happened maybe in the 2.4 or something, later on, I think it possibly could have been considered the best patch, but it was the very first patch, so we were still being introduced to everything. And this one instead was, kind of later on, and it completed a lot of the cycles, and it solved a lot of questions for me. A lot of people were like, I knew that all along. I was like, well, good for you, man. I had no clue that was going on. Overall, though, I really enjoyed it, and Rinascita as a whole was a lot of fun. So, these are my rankings. I hope you guys enjoyed them. Let me know down in the comments whether you agree or disagree. I'm sure there will be a lot of people who think I'm off the reservoir. we should be getting some really good stuff with 3.0. I'm excited.
Wait,
I'm
she get an
hoping
outfit
we're gonna
change?
get some good
She
stuff, and
did.
hopefully they will know that this is you know, it's a gotcha game. They're introducing all these characters. We want to see these characters. I'm not saying that they have to appear every patch, but if you weave a story in which, you know, multiple characters are able to be seen in the patches going on, it makes it much more enjoyable. You know, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Good luck to you guys on your Chisa polls if you are pulling. And, well, I'm excited to see what we're going to get for 3.0. Anyways, I will catch you guys later. Neptarka out. See you guys.